Okay, let's get right into it. Magic is absolutely not just about waving a wand around and hoping for the best. It's a precise science, governed by incredibly intricate mechanics involving pure survival, mana manipulation, and even divine law. To truly master it, you've got to understand the exact formulas and tactical systems that dictate reality. We're talking everything from harnessing wild magic to exploiting literal gods. And in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how that works, using the brilliant case studies of two mages, Derek and Isaac.
We've got a lot of ground to cover today. We'll be walking through the magic class divide, the principles of wild magic, asymmetric magical combat, forging internal mana cores, subverting holy magic, and finally, exploiting divine contracts.
Let's start with Part 1, the magic class divide. Without noble blood, you will not get higher. Now, that quote right there encapsulates the entire academic dogma of Derek's era. In his world, magic is dictated entirely by your bloodline. If you're just an ordinary commoner, society slaps a hard limit on you. 2 stars, that's it. The ruling class basically preaches that effort is literally futile, and frankly, they consider any commoner trying to reach 3 stars to be dangerous.
But here's the thing, Derek completely shatters that ceiling through sheer relentless application. And he does it by mastering the delusion spell, which is a 2-star auditory hallucination. The crazy part? He pulled this off at just 14 years old. He did it by relying on his massive innate mana pool and incredibly stable control. See, by completely shutting out distractions and sensing exactly where mana is born, you can use pure intent to make imagined effects real. It absolutely proves that deep understanding overrides those artificial bloodline limits every single time.
So what do you do when standard idealistic teaching totally fails, especially with a stubborn, noble student who thinks her bloodline is everything? Well, you have to establish a brand new starting point, and that starting point is fear. To force a magical awakening, Derek's method is brutal. Drive the student into a pitch-black night forest and launch targeted 2-star fireballs at them. When death is literally inches away, the body's primal survival instincts just take over, physically forcing the mana to manifest just to stay alive. It's harsh, but it works.
Which brings us nicely to Part 2, Principles of Wild Magic.
You basically have 2 main schools of thought. First, this school of regulations. It's rigid, aristocratic, and completely obsessed with formal incantations and inherited teachings. But if you have a student with a free-spirited, wild temperament, trying to force them into that academic box is just doomed to fail. They belong to the school of the wild. Here, mastery doesn't come from books, it comes from self-study and physically feeling the natural flow of mana in the environment.
Think of it this way. Under the school of the wild, true casting is exactly like painting. Formal spells, they're just tools. If you can actually sense mana moving through nature, you just gather that loose mana and shape it. You don't need to stand there shouting a long incantation. Your intent acts as the brush, effortlessly moving the mana onto the canvas of the real world.
Moving on to Part 3, asymmetric magical combat.
Let me ask you this. How do you actually defeat a higher-tier opponent who's decked out in expensive noble safeguards? When you're facing someone with way more experience and overwhelming firepower, knowing magical theory just isn't enough. You have to rely on asymmetric tactics.
First, you have to understand the battlefield constraints. In this case, we're looking at the Kelb Salon sparring rules, where the very first side to trigger a protective magic circle loses. Because noble combatants are wearing these incredibly expensive automatic charms that completely nullify lethal blows, you can't just overpower them. Victory requires bypassing the charm entirely. You have to land hits that hurt, but somehow don't trigger the automatic shield.
So how do you win? You completely abandon fairness. You turn the actual terrain into a weapon. Picture this. You deliberately shatter the wooden platform you're fighting on and drop down into the darkness beneath the wreckage. From there, you read the opponent's mana flow blindly. You wait and you strike exactly when their guard drops, specifically right during their incantation rhythm. The moment they start to chant, you hit them. And when your mana is finally exhausted, you rely on brutal physical strikes. Drive a boot into their chest, throw dirt in their eyes to blind them. That is how you break a noble opponent.
All right, let's pivot to Part 4, forging internal mana cores.
Now we're diving into Isaac's world, where forging a core from scratch involves an insanely dangerous internal process. Imagine being force-fed a lethal demonic poison. The trick? Don't panic, and definitely don't try to reject it. Treat it as free mana. You absorb it,
Deliberately relax and dive incredibly deep into your subconscious layer, all the way down to the world of origin. Once you're there, you take that toxic energy and condense it, forcing the creation of a pure white mana core. You are literally destabilizing a deadly dark poison and transmuting it into something entirely new.
Next up, Part 5, Subverting Holy Magic.
This is where things get brilliantly tactical. See, parasitic poison is terrifying because it doesn't just incapacitate human priests and paladins. It actively converts their innate holy mana straight into dark mana. For a dark caster, this is a gold mine. It effectively turns those poison holy knights into living mana batteries. You can literally farm their converted power to fuel your own dark spells.
But you can also subvert the holy spells themselves. Take Turn Undead, for example. Normally, this is a complete death sentence for the undead. But if you're forced to cast it on your own loyal skeleton familiars, you can actually hack the spell's parameters. Instead of directing the holy energy into them, you cast it with absolute extreme precision, shaping the execution spell exclusively around their perimeter. By doing this, the holy light becomes an impenetrable protective barrier against outside forces. You completely bypass the execution mechanic and use a weapon of death as a shield of life. It's genius.
And finally, Part 6, Exploiting Divine Contracts.
In this universe, gods literally grant power through legalistic contracts. Let's look at the god of justice. If you're contracted with this deity, you can theoretically leverage their immense power to enforce physical sentences on other beings. Because the god of justice has the supreme authority to impose punishments, they can literally twist and reshape bodies to enforce divine law on sinners and demons.
Knowing that, you can absolutely weaponize a god's own rules against them. Let's say your ally, the giant skeleton king, is fatally wounded. You don't ask the god of justice to smite your enemy. No, you ask the god to execute a humanification sentence on your own ally. Technically, on paper, this is a punishment. It strips the demon of its natural immunities and binds it to a frail human form to feel human pain. But functionally, it violently remakes a giant demon into a human boy, granting him perfect, undetectable camouflage right under the noses of the church inquisitors. You're literally using a divine punishment as a witness protection program.
So, think about what we've just covered. We've seen rigid bloodline ceilings shattered by sheer intent. We've seen combat rules bypassed by destroying the very arena. We've seen lethal poison weaponized into power cores, and literal gods legally manipulated into hiding demons. It leaves us with a pretty massive question to chew on. If every single divine contract and magical limit is just a system waiting to be hacked and rewritten,